الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala in the chapter of Al-Bay' وسائر المعاملات transactions from the book of Akhsar Al-Mokhtasarat, and we stopped by the fasl, by the chapter of Al-Rahn, which is the collateral, having something as a tawthiq للدين, to have something as a collateral for a right, whether it's money or a loan, so that the person would make sure that he gets his money back or whatever he owns back. And there are rulings that are to be applied, and it's by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected this religion. And it shows that there is nothing in our life unless we have to know what is the rulings, what are the etiquettes to be observed. A Muslim should not live his life ignorantly, heedless. He does whatever he wants, like everybody else, without knowing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him. Because in every matter we have certain things to be observed, even if what's to be observed is that everything is permissible unless proven otherwise. That by itself is an act of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is in the subject of al-mu'amalat. And since, as we all know, that almost every single contract that people get to be in, there has to be something. This is the reality of the time that we live in. So it is not an excuse for a person to say, I did not know. If you have to sign a contract, right, that means you have to make sure that every single line in it is according to the deen of Allah. And again, it's not an excuse to say, I didn't know. So either a person has the knowledge of it, or he asks a person of knowledge. And it shows the importance of learning these things. And it takes one level after the other. So be patient with learning these ahkam. And it's not the most perfect way to learn it in English. For example, we have to learn it in the language of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but it's a stage to take us to the next one. And even in the Arabic language, we, as everything else, you go in a stage one level after the other, so that the person would really comprehend the meanings of these principles and be able to see the masail and see the matters in a proper way and form. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit, inshallah. So for those who are not been with us, so the subject might be just in the matters of transactions and collaterals. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our gatherings. And this is deen. This is something that should bring the zuhd in the dunya and the wara' opposite to what people might think. It's not a dry subject. This teaches the Muslim how to have the wara' and to make sure that we don't, when we deal with our money and wealth and things like this, there's halal and haram, and to stay away from what is haram and things like this. This is an act of obedience to Allah. So reading from the fasl, we took the first few sentences, few masail, which says وَكُلُّ مَا جَازَ بَيْعُهُ جَازَ رَهْنُ. This was the first one. And just a quick review, which means everything that is جَازَ بَيْعُهُ, something that is permissible, jaiz to sell, it's also jaiz to make rahn of it, is permissible to use it as a collateral. So al-rahn, as we heard it before, it's tawthiq ad-dayn, to make tawthiq, to make something that is guaranteed for a person. If he gives money, he wants his money back. So he keeps something, the one that the borrower will give something as a collateral in case he's not able to pay back the money or so. And the rules to be applied. So anything that is permissible to sell, it's permissible to keep it as a rahn. Can I say rahn instead of the word collateral? It's difficult for me to say it. So can I just keep the word rahn? Everybody know what rahn is. And actually, linguistically comes from al-ma' al-rahin, is the water when it's stagnant. So that's why it's you give something as a rahn, as a collateral, right? And it stays with the person. Oh, rahn. Oh, mashallah. So now we have anything else? MashaAllah. So it stays, right? But is it permissible to use it or not? This is how we would see inshallah ta'ala. So this is the first mas'ala. And here he says majaz, and we talked about it before. So if something that is not permissible to sell, you cannot use it as rah. So something that is haram, or something that does not belong to you. You cannot give rahn something that you don't own. You know, you cannot give a rahn as a rahn, for example. Someone kept with you amana, or a trust, or something that you save for him till he comes back. You cannot give it as a rahn, of course, obvious. So anything that is jaza bay'u jaza rahn. وكذا ثمر, and the same thing with الثمر والزرع. لم يبدو صلاحهما. بدو الصلاح here, as mentioned before. The same thing with الثمر or الزرع. If it's not ready or not ripe to be picked, so the same thing, the rules applies. وكذا ثمر وزرع لم يبدو صلاحهما وقن دون ولده ونحوه. That means these things can be given if it's not even ready to be picked or harvested, because it's about tawthiq al-dayn. It's about making sure that the dayn is to be paid, so you're not going to use it anyway. Talked about that before. ويلزم في حق راهن بقبض. Also, this is a review. ويلزم في حق راهن بقبض. الراهن is, who's the rahin? The owner of the rahin. So in a case of a debt, he's the borrower. So he's going to give the rahin. So he's the owner of الرهن. والمرتهن is the one that keeps the rahin with him. This is the murtahin. So he says here, ويلزم في حق راهن بقبض. We talked about it before. Anybody can explain that, what that means?
It becomes binding once it's in the possession of the murtahin.
No. أحسنت. So the rahin becomes binding once it's in the possession of al-murtahin. And what also that means is, as a case if someone is going to give a rahin, but he didn't give it yet to the murtahin, it's not binding. Unless once he gives it to him, then it's binding for the rahin, for the owner of it. But it's not binding for the murtahin. The murtahin can give it back. But for the rahin, he does not have the right to break this, because he already gave it to the murtahin. So وَيَلْزَمُ فِي حَقِّ رَاهِنٍ بِقَبْضٍ. And then he says, وَتَصَرُّفُ كُلٍّ مِّنْهُمَا فِيهِ بِغَيْرِ إِذْنِ الْآخَرِ باطل. Now this is the new one here. وَتَصَرُّفُ كُلٍّ مِّنْهُمَا فِيهِ بِغَيْرِ إِذْنِ الْآخَرِ باطل. التصرف, we talked about التصرف before. التصرف is when someone has the right to use something, to use it the way that he desires. And التصرف can takes many different forms. One of which is to deal with it as if it's owned by him. So he can sell it, he can give it as a gift, he can lend it to someone else, or he can use it, but the using it will come later, inshallah ta'ala. So here وتصرف كل منهما. كل منهما means each and every one of them. So both الراهن والمرتهن, both of them, their تصرف, even the owner, تصرف الراهن وتصرف المرتهن, dealing with it, selling it, giving it as a gift, whatever there is, بغير إذن الآخر, without the إذن. الإذن is the permission. Without the permission of the other one, باطل, that means it's not valid, it does not work, it has no validity to it whatsoever. And this is when after الراهن, he gives it to the murtahin. Right? So once the murtahin, he gets the rahm in his possession, and the possession meaning qabd, that means he got it with whatever the qabd means. As mentioned before, al-qabd depends on the urf. We're saying all kinds of Arabic words here, so now we're picking up the language, right? Al-urf is the norm. If it's difficult to understand, let me know, inshallah. So the urf is the norm of the people. So the possession or the qabd can be hand to hand. It can be something else. He can be given the keys of the car of someone. It can be, it's there in the lot. Whenever you have time, go get it. This is all qabd. That means either by at-takhliyah, so that means you leave it for him to go get it. This is also considered qabd. So it's different from one time to the other, environments, the culture of the people, of what is really that the person has this in his possession. So here, التصرف, to use it, to deal with it the way that he likes, it is not permissible. Once the murtahin, once he receives it, it is not permissible for him to sell it, for example, because it's a collateral, it's rah. It's not permissible for him to do whatever he wants with it. And the same thing with the rahan. The same thing with the rahan, because he gave it as a rahan. So how can he sell it to someone else or give it as a gift to someone else, even though he's the owner of it? Right? So this is how the mas'ala is. And this is very clear because it's rahan. But there's an exception. He says, إِلَّا عِتْقَ رَاهِنٍ إِلَّا عِتْقَ رَاهِنٍ وَتُؤْخَذُ قِيمَتُهُ مِنْهُ رَهْنًا. Except the عِتْق. العتق is عتق, to free a slave. العتق is to free a slave. And in Ramadan, when about the وَلِلَّهِ عُتَقَاء من النار وذلك كل ليلة من رمضان, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are عتقاء من النار, those who are freed from the hellfire. So here, عتق, there is an exception here when it comes to the tasarruf. That means if someone, and for those who are not with us, again, we're repeating the subject of al-abid, or the slaves as it's mentioned in the books of fiqh, because everybody can understand what a human being is. So even there is no slavery, but we understand what a human being is. But if it's something that is ashnan, anybody knows what ashnan is? It's like soap, but it's dealt with in their time. If they say something like this, we don't have it, we don't understand it, it might be difficult. So that's why this is always repeated in the books of fiqh. But here, this is not about the example, this is an exception to the issue of a tasarruf. So, إِلَّا عِتْقَ راهن. الراهن, if he frees his slave, right? This is permissible without the permission. Or even the same thing when it comes to the murtahin, but إِلَّا عِتْقَ راهن, if the rahin frees his slave, it's okay. So the original ruling is al-rahin and the murtahin, they cannot deal, or they cannot have the freedom to use the rahn the way they like, except if it's a slave. Why? Because as we know that al-shar' in the deen of Islam, as they always say, al-shar'u yatashawwafu lil-'itq. The deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rulings of the deen of Islam, always looking forward to free slaves. So if there's any opportunity for a slave to be freed, go ahead and do it. Even though it's a rahn, you cannot sell a rahn, but if it's a slave, you can. But then what the murtahin is going to do? You give him a slave as a rahn, and now you sell him. So he needs to have something tawfiq, something as a collateral for the loan that he gave. So then that's why he says, وَتُؤْخَذُ قِيمَتُهُ مِنْهُ رَهْنًا. Then tu'khad, then it's to be taken from him, from al-rahin, the qima, the value, rahnan. Because he freed him, that means he did not sell him, he freed the slave. He did not take anything in return. But to keep the collateral, that means the qima, the value of that slave is to be given to the murtahin as a rahn. Is it clear? So, إِلَّا عِتْقَ رَاهِنٍ وَتُؤْخَذُ قِيمَتُهُ مِنْهُ رَهْنًا. As we agreed when we're reading here, we're making sure that we understand the Arabic word. We're trying to understand it to the best of our ability, word by word. إِلَّا عِتْقَ رَاهِنٍ وَتُؤْخَذُ, in the passive tense. وَتُؤْخَذُ قِيمَتُهُ. We talked about al-qima. What's the other word that when it comes to the qima, there's something else? Versus al-thaman. Right, al-qima wal-thaman. What's al-qima? The value. Al-thaman is the price. So there's difference between the value and the price. You had a good deal, you paid price that is less than the qima, less than the value. Or the value is more or less, whatever. So here that's why the ulama, the fuqaha are very precise. They say وَتُؤْخَذُ قِيمَتُهُ, the value of the slave منه رهنا. Clear? So التصرف is forbidden. التصرف is باطل, is not valid from both الراهن والمرتهن إلا عتق, إلا عتق راهن, and then وتؤخذ قيمته منه رهنا, to be taken as rahn also. The next one, وهو أمانة في يد مرتهن. وهو, what is هو? Refers to الرهن. وهو means the rahn. And he is, but of course you don't say the rahn, you say it, but in the Arabic language وهو, that means the rahn, the collateral is أمانة. أمانة is a trust في يد مرتهن, in the hands of the مرتهن, in the one that is given the rahn to, not the owner of it. So, and the word amana has ahkam to it, rulings to it. Right? The word amana is not just a trust and the guide to keep the trust. What is amana here in the fiqh sense? That means he is not, it's not given to him as a loan. It's not given to him as a gift. It's given to him as a rahn, yes, but he deals with it when it comes to losing it or something happens to it as amana. And the amin, the one that is being entrusted to keep something. If you're traveling and you want to keep something with someone, something that you're worried that it might get lost, you want to keep your car parked in the parking lot of your friend or in the house of your friend because you're traveling. And you keep it there and someone comes, and he steals it. Does that person that the car is in his house, is he responsible? Yes or no? No, he's not responsible because he's Amin. It's been given to him as a trust. So Al-Amin la yadman. The Amin does not guarantee anything because otherwise people are not going to help one another unless there's tafrit, unless he did something that negligence. You know, he kept the car doors open and the key is there and it's running and he's in the house. And if someone comes and steals it, yes, he has to give him back, you know, the like of it or the value of it and so on, because it was negligence from him. Or if he, you know, drove the car in the wall and he smashed the car, he's responsible. But he treated the car or treated whatever it was given to him in the norm of what people would do with it. He's not damin. And the daman is the next chapter, by the way. He does not guarantee anything. So when he says here, the rahn is amana in the hand of the murtahin, the one that receives it. He is dealing with it as amana. That means if something happened to it, without tafrit from him, without negligence from him, without him ruining that rahn, there's no daman on him. He does not guarantee, he's not responsible for that. Right? And the word yadi murtahin, al-yad is the hand of the murtahin, meaning in his possession that he has. And that's why there is either a person owns something, and if you own something, you can do whatever you want to do with it. But if you are given something as amana, and that's why even the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they were very particular in this. Zubayr ibn al-Awam radiallahu anhu, when he died, it was said that he left close to 5 million dinars. But it wasn't his, it was his money, very rich, right? But it was the amanat of the people. People were keeping their money with him, but he would refuse to take it as the amana. He would take it as a loan. Why? Because if he takes it as a amana, and if it's lost, then he is not responsible. But he would do that for their benefit, because if something happens to it, he's responsible. So that's why al-amana is different than having something that you own. And if a person borrows something, if you borrow a car, for example, that's why the words has to be clear. Are you borrowing the car, or the car is kept with you as amana? If you're borrowing the car, you're responsible for everything. If something happens, you're like the owner of it. But if it's, we talked about Al-Qard before, but if it's amana, it's different. So that's why again, وَهُوَ أَمَانَةٌ. So what applies as amana here is with regards to the rahn. So if he is negligence or something happened, then he is not responsible for giving the value of it and things like this. وَهُوَ أَمَانَةٌ فِي يَدِ مُرْتَهِنٍ. So الرهن is amana. Then another مسألة here that as a result of that وإن رهن. This is easy so far. It's clear. No questions, because the next one is going to be a little bit complicated. Not complicated, easy inshallah. وإن رهن عند اثنين فوفى أحدهما أو رهناه فاستوفى من أحدهما انفك في نصيبه. Which means this is an if statement. وإن رهن. رهن is the verb. الرهن is the collateral. رهن فلان in the past tense. That means he gave us a رهن. عند اثنين. That means he gave رهن. The راهن gave a رهن to two people. He gave one رهن to two people. وإن رهن عند اثنين. That means, why would a person give رهن to two people? He borrowed from two people and he gave them one thing as a رهن for both of them. He borrowed from that person $100 and from the other person $100, and he gave them both a piece of gold as a رهن, something like this. That is for between both of them. So this is وإن رهن عند اثنين فوفى أحدهما. فوفى الوفاء is to fulfill, is that he gave back the loan in full to only one of them. أحدهما, one of them. So this is one مسألة, right? أو رهناه. That means that two people, they gave one رهن to him. Right? So the opposite, the مسألة and the opposite of it. So you have one and two in the opposite ways. فاستوفى من أحدهما. So he got his money from one of them. فاستوفى من أحدهما, one of them. So you see the two cases? So one is borrowed from two versus two borrowed from one. It's the same mas'ala, it's the same ruling. So if two people, they borrowed from one person, and both of them, they get together, give him one collateral that would be sufficient for both of us. And the opposite is one person he borrowed from two. So he gave them both one rahn to be sufficient for both of them. Clear? So they're both the same. That's why it's mentioned before the hukm here, before the ruling comes, because they're the same thing. أو رهناه. This is in the dual tense. They gave him rahn. فاستوفى من أحدهما. So in the first case, if he borrowed from two and he gave them one rahn, but then he gave the loan of the first one only. So what to do with the second one with the rahn? And both on the other case, two of them, they borrowed from him and they gave him both one rahn. One gave him the loan that is upon him. So what to do with the other person? So what's the hukm here? انفك في نصيبه. Infakka means it's detached. That means he's done. It's a very obvious one, right? So the one that gave him the money, gave the loan back, then he's done with his rights. انفك في نصيبه. So then al-marhun in the second one becomes upon the second one, right? So it's still rahn for the second one. So the rahn is not completely what you call the rahn when it's done, dissolved or something like this. So it's not dissolved yet, because one was one rahn for both. One fulfilled his rights, he gave his money back. So still the rahn is not to be taken back but then it applies on the second one, not on the first one, unless the rahn can be separated. This is the subject of tafriq al-safqa. We talked about it before. Unless the rahn, you can take part of it and leave another part. Even though it's one, but you can take part and leave part. If this is feasible, then you leave the part that is still from the other guy that didn't pay his money back. Is it clear? So this is what it says, انفك في نصيبه. So he does not have to go back again for both of them. One is finished, so he only go onto the other one, the one that did not pay his money back yet. So this is وإن رهن عند اثنين فوفى. Who's the one that وفى? The one that رهن, the راهن. فوفى أحدهما أو رهناه. That means two of them, they gave him a رهن and he becomes the مرتهن. فاستوفى that means he asked for the wafa, or he finished, fulfilled من أحدهما, from one of them, انفك من نصيبه. Then this is, he fulfilled his part to that one person versus the other one. Then he says, the second مسألة, the next one, وإذا حل الدين. Now, إذا حل الدين. الدين is the debt, the loan. حل means like halal, but here حل, that means the time of it comes. The time came where he's supposed to pay the debt. He gave a rahn, and the debt is after a year. He has a year to pay the debt. So now the year passed, and now he's supposed to pay the money back, and there is a rahn. What to do now in this case? Of course, the obvious one is he gives the money that he owes, and the other guy give him the rahn, and the matter is over. But what if there's a dispute? This is what the mas'ala is. وَإِذَا حَلَّ الدَّيْنُ وَامْتَنَعَ مِنْ وَفَائِهِ. امتنع means, al-man' is to withhold, is to deprive someone from a right that he has. So وَامْتَنَعَ, that means he stopped, he does not want to, he refuses min وَفَائِهِ, from fulfilling the loan of the other person. So the word wafa has been mentioned. And al-wafa, whether it's something physical or non-physical. You know, al-wafa is to be faithful to someone, things like this, and also to fulfill the rights that is upon you. So إذا حل الدين وامتنع من وفائه. The dain time comes and he refuses to pay back what he took. And there is a rahn here. Of course, we're talking about rahn, not talking about something else. And there is a rahn. What is then the deal? And you have to be careful, because these things are happening now even with many of the contracts, and it's not permissible, many of the things that people deal with this. And the same thing with whether it's a loan or you purchased something with payments and you keep something as a collateral, even the same thing. Like you purchased a car, as long as everything is halal and you're giving payment, and the car itself becomes a collateral. If a person, which is all car dealers, they do this, if you're not able to pay the payments, they can come and possess the car, right? So a person refuses to pay. How to deal with him? He says, فَإِنْ كَانَ أَذِنَ لِمُرْتَهِنٍ فِي بَيْعِهِ بَاعَ. فَإِنْ كَانَ, if statement. And so if he, أَذِنَ means permitted, give the idhn, the permission. And أَذِنَ is the verb. Al-idhn is the noun. أَذِنَ, that means he gave the permission. Who, the one that gives the permission? الراهن أذن لمرتهن. Right? فإن كان أذن لمرتهن. He doesn't have to say فإن كان الراهن أذن. Right? The more that you have less words, the more eloquent the words are. Right? So it's already understood that if he says فإن كان أذن لمرتهن, so that means who's the one that أذن لمرتهن? الراهن. So فإن كان أذن لمرتهن, if he gave the permission to the murtahin, the one that have the rahn in his possession, في بيعه, in selling it. In في بيعه, then باعه, then he would sell it, if he gave him the permission. What if he doesn't give him the permission? وإلا, otherwise, وإلا أجبر على الوفاء. أجبر, الجبر is when someone is forced. You know Al-Jabriya, one of the deviant sects in the Qadr, because they believe everybody's supposed to do whatever. You know, that no choice. So وإن أجبر, that means he has no choice. Then he has to be forced. على what? To do what? على الوفاء, not على البيع. Or الوفاء here is to pay the debt. وإلا أجبر على الوفاء. He has to be forced to pay the debt, because he's refusing for the murtahin to sell it. So then pay what you owe. أو بيع الرهن. Or he will be forced to sell the rahn. Who's to sell the rahn? الراهن. أو بيع الرهن. The rahin is the one that he owns it, so he's the one that sells it. You understand? But who would force him? The qadi, the judge will force الراهن to sell his what he owns, which is الرهن. أو بيع الرهن. Okay? فإن أبى, he says, no, I'm not going to do this or that. no paying of the debt, and I'm not going to sell الرهن. فإن أبى حبس أو عزر. حبس, الحبس is jail, to be confined in a place, which is by the authority, not by the individuals, not the murtahin come here and you lock him up in his room. No, this is by the authority. So this is in front of the judge. So he would, and you go with him like this, and see, this is, you won't find this in anywhere except in the Deen of Islam, like that, right? فإن أبى حبس, then he will be put in prison. أو عزر, التعزير is punishment that is not hudud. Al-had is known, lashing, or the of that's mentioned in the Quran and things like this. But al-ta'zir, it depends. It's up to the judge. Ta'zir can be some lashes or prison or whatever he sees is feasible to punish that person if he refuses. It's in that particular order. فإن أبى حبس أو عزر. But now he put him in prison, like say for a week. The guy can't take, before that he was no, but now when he's in prison, I take it back. I can't deal with the prison. So he would then do whatever they ask him to do. So after he's been in jail or whatever, فإن أصر, أصر means if he's persistent after the jail and after he's been punished by the judge, فإن أصر, then باعه حاكم. الحاكم, the ruler, the judge. Al-Hakim is the ruler and the one that works on behalf of the ruler, which is the judge. The judge is the one that sells it, not the murtahin, not Ar-Rahin is refusing. So after one step after the other, he's still refusing. Then باعه حاكم. Al-Hakim, he's the one that would sell it. The government, the authority will sell it. ووفى دينه. Then they will give the dain to the murtahin in this case. So ووفى دينه. And of course, they'll take him out of prison. What most of the contracts do, the dealer goes straight to the guy, takes the car in the early morning or in the middle of the night, and he disappears. And this is not according to the deen of Allah. But if this is, I'm not saying, if someone, this is the only way that he does and he needs to have his rights. But if someone, say for example, you do this, what people would do, they would take the car, for example, and that's it. That's not permissible. Because you're only entitled to the money that the guy owes, not more than that. So if he took the car today and he paid and there's only one payment left, and the car is still new or worth money, so the payment left, say for example it's $100, and the guy didn't pay it, they would give him the right to go get the car. And if he takes the car and he sells it, for $5,000, he keeps it. That's haram. He only entitled to the $100. So if he takes it and he sells it against all of these different steps, but if he does this, then the owner of the car is supposed to return back to him $4,900, and he only keep the 100 for him because he only owes $100, not more than that. If it's less, if he sells the car and it's less, then he go after him. You still have to pay me that much. So, but here how things, if it's dealt with the authorities, this is one step after the other, and it shows when someone owns something, it's not an easy matter for people just to take it from them. So there are steps to be taken. And at the same time, the rights is not to be lost. The murtahin, he will get his right, but just be patient for a few days, few weeks, whatever, till the matter becomes clear. Clear? So now.
So when the murtahin gives a permission, does he give him a permission before or after? Let's say
Ar-Rahin, you mean? No.
Give him my car.
Right.
Say you have the permission to sell the car after they didn't pay us a year. Or can I say after that year and then I give him
the idhn here, the permission, he can say it earlier, but in the case if I did not give you your money by this date, you have the permission to sell the rahn. But not you have the permission to sell the rahn, if I'm not able to, like, it has to be very precise. By that particular day, if I didn't come up with the money, then you have, I'm giving you the permission to sell Myra. So وإذا حل الدين, just to read it to make sure that it's clear. وإذا حل الدين وامتنع من وفائه فإن كان أذن لمرتهن في بيعه باعه. That's the first case. وإلا أجبر. Otherwise أجبر على الوفاء أو بيع الرهن. Then he is to be forced to fulfill, to give the loan, أو بيع الرهن, or to sell. And who's going to force him? The authority, not the مرتهن. فإن أبى, if he refuses, حبس أو عزر. فإن أصر, after the حبس, after the jail, أصر, he still insists, باعه حاكم. The حاكم would sell it. ووفى دينه, and he would fulfill and give his day. Clear? Then وغائب كممتنع. Inshallah, after we finish, we'll be good in Arabic language, so we can make sentences, right? So وغائب كممتنع. غائب, what's غائب? Absentees or absent. When someone is absent, like exactly the same ruling as ممتنع. ممتنع وامتنع. ممتنع is the person that refuses to whatever he's commanded to do. So وغائب كممتنع. So the same rulings apply for al-ghaib, which the one that he disappeared. Al-rahin, he gave the rahan, and he's supposed to come back and give and pay the loan and take his rahan, but he disappeared. Nobody knows where he's at. So the same rulings apply as if he's mumtani'. As if he is mumtani'. That means they can't find him, permission, this, of course they cannot put him in jail. So meaning, then the hakim, the ruler at the end, would, after taking all of the means, would sell al-rahan to give the money to the murtahi. وَغَائِبٌ كَمُمْتَنِعٌ. Clear? That's why al-ghiba is what? ذِكْرُكَ أَخَاكَ بِمَا كَرَهَ, when you mention your brother in his absence of what he dislikes. وَغَائِبٌ كَمُمْتَنِعٌ. Ready for the next one? It's okay? It's too much? طيب. He says, وَإِن شَرَطَ, this is a conditional statement. وَإِن شَرَطَ. That means if he made a condition. الشرط is the condition. شَرَطَ, that's the verb. And who's the one that شَرَطَ here? Who's the one that would make a condition? Is الراهن. وَإِن شَرَطَ أَلَّا يُبَاعَ إِذَا حَلَّ الدَّيْنِ. If he made as a condition, not to sell if the dain time comes. أَلَّا يُبَاعَ. That it's not to be sold. يُبَاع in the passive tense. That it's not going to be sold. إِذَا حَلَّ الدَّيْنِ. حَلَّ الدَّيْنِ, that means the time of the debt where he's supposed to pay comes. وَإِن شَرَط, if he made this as a condition, that he's given the rahan and he says, if the time comes for the dain, I don't give permission, and he make it as a condition that it's not to be sold. You do not sell the rahan. أو إن, or إن جاءه. You see the condition? That means not just for the murtahin to sell it, not even the hakim, because he make a condition. He put a thing in the contract, this rahan is never to be sold, right? Or أو إن جاءه بحقه, or as a condition, if he comes إن جاءه, if he comes to the murtahin بحقه, by his right, في وقت كذا, in this specific time, وإلا فالرهن له بالدين. Otherwise, the rahn is for him in return of the dain, in return of the loan. You see the second one, which is most of what everybody does. So he gives a rahn, and they put it in the contract. If he comes on that date with the loan, mashallah, he gives the loan, he takes his rahn. If he doesn't, al-rahn belongs to the murtahi, and it becomes in return of the debt. لم يصح الشرط. Both shart here is not valid. Even if they write it in the contract, even if they agreed, it's not valid. It's nothing. So why? Because the first one, he does not have the right to say the rahan is not to be sold. So what's the purpose of the rahan anyway? So that means the guy, he loses the money that he gave him. So he cannot say that. Because this is again, even though the hakim is the one that is going to sell it, but to have it as a condition, that's not valid. And the same thing also to say that it's if he's not able to pay, then you take the rah. I don't want it. This is also not valid. It's not a valid condition because he's only entitled to the loan, not more or less. If it's less, he goes after him. But clear? So you have to read the whole sentence. So this is two conditions that have the same ruling, like the previous case that we had. So when you read it, وَإِن شَرَطَ أَلَّا يُبَاعَ إِذَا حَلَّ الدَّيْنِ, that's one. أو or إن جاءه بحقه في وقت كذا. When you say وقت is time. كذا means such and such. وإلا, otherwise, فالرهن له بالدين. If he comes to him at that time, otherwise the rahn will be for him by the dain, by the loan. لم يصح الشرط. The shart is not valid, is not permissible. Clear? When we read the mutun like this, it's very important sometimes to put the commas and to kind of separate them, because sometimes it becomes confusing. Where does it end? Where does what belong to? Should we go to the next one? Everybody's there? طيب. Let's take one sentence more. You guys have to tell me if it's okay. Is it okay? ولمرتهن, everybody's following? ولمرتهن أن يركب ما يركب ويحلب ما يحلب بقدر نفقته بلا إذن. Now, this is going to deal with the rahn itself, how to deal with it. التصرف, before we said it's not permissible. التصرف meaning selling, giving gifts. But now he has a rahn. And this rahn, he has it in his possession. Can he touch it? Can he ride on it? Can he, as he says, وَلِمُرْتَهِنٍ, the murtahin, the one that has the rahn in his possession, for him, وَلِمُرْتَهِن, that means it's for him, أَنْ يَرْكَبَ مَا يُرْكَبْ, that he, yarkab means to ride on what can be, what's the past tense of ride? Ridden, right? So he can ride what's is ridden. So if the rahn was a horse, and the horse is in his possession, he can ride the horse. Right? وَيَحْلُبَ مَا يُحْلَبْ. This is very good practice in the Arabic language, right? So yarkab, this is the present tense of rakiba, riding. مَا يُرْكَبْ. Yurkab is in the passive tense. Yarkab, yurkab. Yarkab is what he rides. Yurkab is what is ridden. وَيَحْلُبْ, which means from, the word halib, milk. So وَيَحْلُبْ, that's the verb of it. وَيَحْلُبْ, that means he milks what milked. مَا يُحْلَبْ. So if it's a cow, if it's a goat, right? This is the rahn. He said that I don't own it. It's owned by who? By the rahin, but now it's in the possession of the murtahin. Does he leave it without milking it? Because he has to milk it. So he milk what is to be milked. But then it's not just that open like that. بقدر نفقته بلا إذن. بقدر نفقته, according to how much he spent on it. These things he has to spend on it. Because this is an animal, for example. So he has to bring it food. Right? The murtahin, he has it with him. So he has to bring food for the animals. So that means he can use whatever the animals give as a result of his spending on it. بقدر نفقته. بلا إذن, without permission from the rahin. Because otherwise he's going to ruin the animal. Can that be applied for the car? No. Because he can park the car. He doesn't have to use the car. Unless, again, to keep it open, keep the door open, if harm happens, if something, But the norm is, if something is not going to be harmed, if it's not used, then keep it. Unless he gives a permission. Unless he permits. If he permits, the matter is easy. But if he permits, before we go forward, which is also something that can be confusing, if the rahn is as a result of a qard, then it's haram to be used even if he permits. Because كل قرض جر نفع فهو ربا. Because the qard, the loan now is bringing benefit. So a person gives someone a loan. give him as a loan. He gave him $1,000 as a loan, and he gave him his car as a rahan, and use the car. You know, he permits for him to use the car till he bring him back the $1,000. It's haram. It's riba. Because he, you know, now he benefited from the loan. But if it's not a qard, it's okay. Meaning if he sells something to him and he did not give him the money back yet, even though it's in the category of loan, but it's different than the qard. He wants money from him, but not as a qard, as the rest of the money that he gave him as a payment of purchased something. And of course, al-hiyal, tricks are haram. So anything that, you know, people would do as a trick, it's haram. But before we get into this, let's take one step of the other, inshallah. ولمرتهن أن يركب ما يركب ويحلب ما يحلب بقدر نفقته بلا إذن, without permission. We'll take the rest quickly and then we can say it again, inshallah ta'ala, next time. وإن أنفق عليه, if he spend on the رهن. وإن أنفق, ومن نفق, if he spend على الرهن. Who's going to spend? المرتهن. If he spends بلا إذن راهن, without the permission of a راهن, مع إمكانه, while he was able to, he spent on it. He could have asked the rahin, can I spend on a rahin? Because it needs, he gave him a rahin as a building, you know, or apartment as a rahin, right? And he wants to spend on it, you know, he wants to paint it or whatever, or the car, he wants to fix something in it. Bila idhni rahin, and he has the means to ask for permission, but he didn't. Lam yarji'. If he did that without his permission, even though he had the means, lam yarji', that means he does not go back to the rahin to ask for money. He did not give him the permission to fix something or to use something. You have it as an amana, you don't deal with it. And this is the same thing with amana. Someone give you as an amana, and if you want to do a favor for him, mashallah, it's up to you. But you don't go back and say, well, this is how much I paid for doing this, for that thing. وإلا, and except وإلا رجع بالأقل مما أنفقه ونفقة مثل النواة. Unless sometimes he have to, because otherwise if he has to because it's going to be ruined or something like this, then in that case رجع, the word رجع returns, but he returns meaning that he has the right to go back to the rahin to ask for money. بالأقل, with the less money, مما أنفقه, what he spent, ونفقة مثلي, and the nafaqa of the like of it, in nawa, if he intended to it. But again, this we can talk about inshallah next time. But it's basically, say for example, the car, he fixed something in it, and he permitted for him to use it, for example, and he fixed something that is not from his fault, something that he fixed. They say here, as it's going to be mentioned, he has the right to take from him the least of what in the market or what's known to be the price of fixing this. So if he goes and he fixes it in someone that is very expensive, then the rahin is not entitled to this. He could have taken it to something cheaper. So when it comes to, I mean, if the guy gave him, mashallah, it's good from him. But he would go by بالأقل مما أنفقه ونفقة مثلي النوى. then ومعار ومؤجر ومودع كرهن ولو خرب فعمره رجع بآلته فقط. But we'll leave that for next time. طب we stop at وإن أنفق عليه, and if he spend on it, we'll repeat that again inshallah. So we'll read, if you want to read after me from the beginning of the chapter till that point, just one time to make sure that we read it inshallah. He says وكل, you guys have it, ما جاز بيعه جاز رهنه وكذا ثمر وزرع لم يبدو صلاحهما وقن دون ولده ونحوه ويلزم في حق راهن بقبض وتصرف كل منهما فيه بغير إذن الآخر باطل إلا عتق راهن وتؤخذ قيمته منه رهنا وهو أمانة في يد مرتهن. وإن رهن عند اثنين فوفى أحدهما أو رهناه فاستوفى من أحدهما انفك في نصيبه. وإذا حل الدين وامتنع من وفائه فإن كان أذن لمرتهن في بيعه باعه، وإلا أجبر على الوفاء أو بيع الرهن. فإن أبى حبس أو عزر. فإن أصر باعه حاكم ووفى دينه. وغائب كممتنع. وإن شرط ألا يباع إذا حل الدين أو إن جاءه بحقه في وقت كذا وإلا فالرهن له بالدين لم يصح الشرط. ولمرتهن أن يركب ما يركب ويحلب ما يحلب بقدر نفقته بلا إذن. طيب الحديث is it 91? Or do you take فإذا تفاءب أحدكم فليكظم وتبذأ النوم, right? So number 91. So 91. So hadith 91 إن شاء الله. It says here عنه, which is عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من سمع رجلا ينشد ضالة في المسجد فليقل لا ردها الله عليك فإن المساجد لم تبن لهذا. The hadith is من سمع رجلا, whoever hears a man ينشد ضالة في المسجد. ينشد, calling, looking, النشيد is when someone says something, but here ينشد, he's hoping for, he's calling for. ينشد ضالة, something lost. And الضلال is deviation, right? Because someone is lost from the straight path, but he is calling people in the masjid saying, I lost my watch. Did anybody see my watch? He comes to the masjid and he says, I lost my camel, right? I lost my keys. I lost this. This is yanshud. This is inshad al-dal. Looking and calling upon people that he lost something. Whether it's by voice or putting a poster or something like this. People, whenever they do something, they have making advertisements for it. So this is more of advertising for it. This is how inshad al-dalla is. And he stand up and he calls for it, or whatever means that he would make inshad al-dalla fil masjid, in the masjid. فليقل, if he hears a man doing this, then you should say, لا ردها الله عليك. لا ردها, may Allah does not return it back to you. Why? فإن المساجد لم تبنى لهذا. Because as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, because the masajid has not been built for that. Masajid, once you open the masjid for this, it becomes like a marketplace. People will come, I lost my camel. Camels here. I lost my car in my neighborhood. Anybody sees or anything. The masajid is not for this. إن المساجد لم تبنى لهذا. What happens if someone lost something in the masjid? Of course, if it's obvious. If he lost it away from the masjid, it is not permissible to come to the masjid. You leave the whole world and you come to the masjid and you want to ask, where is it? It's not permissible. But if he lost something in the masjid, he lost his phone in the masjid or his keys in the masjid, it is still not permissible to be in the masjid and to ask for it. And the same thing, for people sometimes, or they do that in the masjid and they will call for it, it's not permissible. Is it permissible to have a place in the masjid for lost and found? Yes. So you can have, it's known that, there's a place in the masjid where they would, if they find something, they keep it there if someone comes look for it. Or he can stand outside the masjid and ask people when they're coming out, but not in the masjid, not in the masjid calling people, things like this. And more of its ruling, inshallah, but we'll keep it there, inshallah. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. تفضل.